The porcelain teacup trembled slightly in my hand. Not from the heat, not from weakness, but from betrayal. A betrayal so intimate, it vibrated through the very fibers of my being. Yet not a single flicker of emotion crossed my face. My expression remained perfectly schooled, placid, controlled. Across the sun-drenched living room, my husband Evan murmured to my sister, "Claire, after her accident," he whispered, "contesting the prenup will be easy." His voice was low, intimate, conspiratorial. She was unstable when she signed it. Dr. Wells will testify. Dr. Wells, our marriage counselor, his mistress. Claire nodded, her eyes sparkling with greedy anticipation. She didn't know. He didn't know. The accident had already happened. They didn't know I was back. Alive, conscious, listening, remembering everything. The faint trace of Evan's cologne, sandalwood, mingled with Claire's overly sweet floral perfume. Scents that once meant warmth, family, love. Now they stank like carrion, like vultures circling what they believed was a dying fortune. Behind my quiet smile, my first counterattack was already lining up. The strategy already forming. 2 years earlier, the swirling lights of the museum gala reflected off glass and polished brass. Laughter, soft music, champagne flutes held aloft. That was the first time Evan appeared, materializing beside me like a conjured charm. His suit was perfectly tailored, his smile so practiced, the scent of desperation, undetectable then. I was too young, too eager, too naive to see it. He had made me feel seen. Me, the quiet one, the sterling girl always in the background, the bookworm, the overlooked. But in Evan's eyes, I had been the center of gravity. He spun his web fast, flirting, adoring, attentive. Felt like being chosen. Special. Whispers of forever. A ring. A proposal. Just weeks before my 25th birthday. The day the first tier of the Sterling Family Trust Fund would be unlocked. He knew the date. Everyone in our social circles knew the Sterling Trust's rigid timeline. What I didn't know then was the mountain of debt Evan was drowning in beneath that confident surface. He wasn't some successful finance bro. He was a liability with a perfect smile. A ticking bomb disguised as a husband. I thought I had found love. What I had found was a strategy. Even grandfather, sharp as he was, had been momentarily taken in. "He seems attentive," he had said once, eyeing Evan over his spectacles. He hadn't smiled, but his voice had softened. It meant something. It meant Evan had passed the test. The test of the old man who had spent his life protecting the sterling fortune from gold diggers, predators, and fools. The prenup he insisted on was drafted by Martin Reynolds, our family's longtime attorney. Clean, ironclad, generational, or so we believed. I had signed it without hesitation, without reading the fine print. Evan had played the part of the dutiful fiancé so well, I didn't question a thing. Now I sit across from them, watching Claire sip her tea. She steals quick glances between us, me the wife she betrayed, him the man she helped. A smirk dances around her lips. The younger sister, always second, always simmering in silent resentment. She once warned me, ironically, "Isn't he moving awfully fast, Alara?" she had asked, her brows creased with actual concern. A rare flicker of care from a sibling who usually only competed. But Evan had seen it. The jealousy, the hunger for the wealth she'd never get. And instead of charming her romantically, he charmed her strategically. He whispered to her of shared futures, of power, of what she deserved. Her motives weren't just jealousy, they were fear. Our father, well-meaning but foolish, had wrecked our family's finances with one bad investment after another. Claire had grown up terrified of the middle-class life she felt trapped in. She didn't want to survive. She wanted ease. She wanted my life. And Evan had offered it. Through me. For months, Claire became my shadow. Her phone always at the ready, recording every sigh, every moment of exasperation, every time I raised my voice or rubbed my temples in frustration. They were building a case of instability, a case to dismantle the prenup, brick by treacherous brick. Martin Reynolds, our trusted family lawyer, adjusted his silk tie during one of our meetings and smiled at me. Oily, reassuring. Just routine estate planning updates era. Nothing to worry your pretty head about. I smiled back. I had learned to smile like that from Evan. Martin had been with our family for generations. His father had worked with my great-grandfather. Loyalty, tradition, discretion, sterling values. All a lie. Beneath that polished exterior, Martin had been stewing for years. Handling billions. Living in Tweed. Watching men with more money and less intelligence call the shots. He hadn't just overlooked the loopholes in the prenup. He'd written them. Subtle ambiguities. Psychological clause traps. Clever wordings that only someone equally desperate could find. Now he was pointing Evan right toward them. Last time, before the accident, before Rebirth, I'd overheard Martin on the phone in my library. Panic in his voice. Trying to cover gambling losses. Trying to fix bad bets. And Evan? He was his jackpot. They were all circling me like buzzards. Martin, Evan, Claire. Each with their own plan. Each building a cage I wouldn't see until it slammed shut. Dr. Wells, my therapist, the woman I was meant to trust, sat across from me in her clean office and patted my hand. Her voice was soft, professional. These feelings of persecution, of being watched, they're symptoms of stress era. Let's talk about that. She smiled. Lit. Gaslit. I nodded like a good patient. But what she didn't know, what they all didn't know, was that I'd already placed a discreet tracker on Evan's car. I had seen them, her and him, the way he touched her wrist at dinner, the way she leaned toward him in the bar parking lot, their chance encounter at that medical conference, staged. Every session now, a weapon. She twisted my suspicions into paranoia, my anger into erratic behavior. Evan would sigh and shake his head. She's spending recklessly, he'd say. It's out of control. Then glance sideways at her. The implication clear. Maybe we should try medication. Wells would nod gently. Always calm. Always dangerous. I started digging. She had a history. A malpractice suit. Quietly buried. A patient who had been pushed too far. Broken. Money silenced it. But I found the grave. This time, I had a shovel of my own. It started with a fall. Not an accident. Not really. The grand staircase. Marble beneath my bare feet. A familiar moment. Evan behind me. Reaching out. Careful, darling, he whispered. Then his hand slipped. Deliberate. A small shove. I tumbled. Not far. Just enough. A sprained ankle. A bruised hip. A story to tell. His story. Oh my God, are you okay? He gasped as he rushed down, feigning concern. Same lines. Same drama. Same old script. At the hospital, Claire appeared like clockwork. Tears in her eyes. Fluffing my pillows. Whispering comfort. While her hands moved fast. Stealing my phone. Deleting texts. Sending new ones. Fabricating evidence. Again. Then came Martin. Papers in hand. Smile grim. A fall like this era. It might be best if Evan had temporary medical power of attorney. Just precaution. I remembered this scene too well. Next steps? Involuntary treatment. Lock me away. Take my trust. Sign it all over. And again they whispered. Outside my door. Wells is ready, Claire said. This accident buys us time, Evan murmured. But the trust schedule is tight. We need her looking unstable, Martin replied. So I cried. Oh, Martin, I sniffled, hand trembling as I reached for the pen. Maybe this is for the best. I signed. Let them believe they had one. Then I leaned on the nurse. Limped to the bathroom. Locked the door. Pulled the burner phone from the ceiling vent. Encrypted messages. Updates. Counterorders. Back in bed when Evan arrived, smiling too sweetly, lilies in hand, I accepted his lies like a good little wife. It wasn't your fault, Evan, I whispered, kissing his cheek. I must have just lost my balance. Let him believe it. Let him believe I was weak. That I had finally broken. But I hadn't broken. Not yet. Not even close. And the pieces of my trap had only just begun to fall into place. The hospital stay was brief. But behind those sterile white walls, I was orchestrating war. Evan thought I was cut off, isolated and vulnerable. In reality, I was 5 moves ahead, each one quietly executed beneath the veil of fatigue and confusion I wore so convincingly. While I feigned dizziness and blurred thoughts, I quietly contacted my financial team through the burner phone. The part of my trust they were targeting, already on the move, transferred into a newly established encrypted offshore account under a name none of them would recognize. Hidden, secure, untouchable. My real attorney, Isabel Morrow, had already received copies of the forged POA documents Martin rushed me into signing. She was already drafting legal landmines. No calls, no fanfare. She was a silent blade, efficient, deadly. Back home, the performance continued. I was resting, too weak to leave my bedroom suite. Claire played nursemaid. She came and went, always with her phone in hand, capturing shaky footage of me pacing at night, or mumbling to myself. Every sigh, every misplaced sentence. Ammunition. Little did she know, I'd already installed microscopic, state-of-the-art cameras throughout the house. Hidden in vents, in picture frames, even beneath the lamp on Dr. Wells' therapy desk. Every whispered plot, every glance, every lie, captured in crystal clarity. One night, pretending to be groggy from pain meds, I wandered into the library. Evan was already there. Phone pressed to his ear. His voice low. She's barely eating. Confused. I think we can move the hearing up. A pause. Wells is ready. Claire has the recordings. Martin's prepping the new trustee amendment now. I backed out silently, closed my door, tucked myself into bed, smiled. Let them set the date. They had no idea that the charity gala was mine. My stage. Weeks passed. I healed. The limp stayed, purposefully exaggerated. Evan held my arm as I entered the grand ballroom. I wore soft pastels, fragile elegance. The crowd greeted me gently, as if I were made of glass. Perfect. My sedative, a carefully timed low dose, gave me just the right sheen of drowsiness. Halfway through the main course, I swayed in my seat, clutched my head. Evan, I whispered loud enough for nearby tables. I feel strange. Immediately, Evan and Claire jumped up. Their concern performative, predictable. He guided me to a quiet side lounge. She followed, fussing. It's the pills Wells prescribed, she murmured, hoping people nearby would hear. They make her confused. Across the ballroom, Isabel Morrow picked up her phone. Simultaneously, the hidden mic on Evan's lapel transmitted audio directly to his own phone, which sat buzzing unattended on the dining table. His business associates leaned in, curious. What is that? One asked. The sound of Evan whispering. She's losing it. Perfect timing for guardianship. Claire's voice followed. Just keep her off balance. Whispers of betrayal. Loud enough now for the entire room to hear. As Evan helped me through the crowd again, I stumbled near Martin Reynolds' table. Eyes wide. Innocent. Martin, those trust documents. Page 17, Clause B. It looked different. His face drained of color. He knew exactly which clause I meant. The one he altered. He knew I knew. He choked on his wine. And the walls started to close in. Across the room, a process server approached Dr. Wells. Dr. Veronica Wells, he said clearly, placing a thick envelope in her hand. You've been served. The woman standing beside him? Tear-streaked. Shaking. The patient Wells destroyed years ago, located and flown in, funded by my private investigator. A lawsuit for emotional manipulation. Confidentiality breach. Malpractice. Wells' carefully constructed world shattered in front of hundreds of donors and press. The chaos was delicious. Gasps. Murmurs. Phones recording. Claire froze beside me. Evan gripped my waist too tightly. Martin looked like he might faint. Wells didn't even speak. Just stood there, white as a ghost. This wasn't revenge. This was evidence. Their game, played in the shadows, now exposed under blinding ballroom lights. But that wasn't the end. They leaned into the narrative. They thought if they accelerated the process, they could still win. She's a danger to herself, Claire whispered to grandfather. You didn't see her at the gala. She was rambling, Martin added. Disoriented. It's heartbreaking. Even Evan, with practiced sorrow, took grandfather aside. Sir, I think temporary guardianship is best. Just until she's stable. Wells, desperate, offered to perform a psychological assessment for the court. Documents were drawn, testimonies prepared, fabricated bank records appeared, erratic transactions I never made, all forged under my name. They thought they were ahead. They thought they could institutionalize me. One night I stood silently on the upstairs gallery, watching them in the library below. "Wells can get her committed," Evan said. "Good," Claire muttered. "We're almost in." "Just keep her fragile," Martin advised. "We've got the hearing date locked." That was always the end game. Trap me in a wellness facility. Take the trust. Strip me of rights. So when they told me about the court hearing, I cried. I made it real. Tears. Shaky hands. A desperate call to grandfather. "I don't understand, why are they doing this to me? Am I going crazy?" I let the confusion flood my voice. The vulnerability. It worked. In my room I left a journal out, filled with entries of fear, confusion, fragmented thoughts. Fake. Designed for Claire to find. She read every word, convinced her plan was working. The day of the evaluation with Dr. Wells, I played the perfect role. Fearful. Nervous. I even pretended to swallow the anxiety pills she prescribed. But the capsule? It went into a small waterproof pocket inside my cheek. Crafted for this moment. They saw sedation. I had clarity. During a therapeutic walk, I met Alistair Finch, retired judge, grandfather's oldest friend, respected, feared. I handed him the files, the audio, the video. His expression grew grim. "I'll handle this," he said. At the same time, my investigator compiled every skeleton in Martin's closet. His gambling debts, photos, audio, paper trails, everything. An anonymous email was sent to the state medical board, detailing Wells' affair with Evan, the biased diagnosis, the prior malpractice case. They were unraveling, and they didn't even know it. Meanwhile, I finalized the final move. The purchase of Evan's outstanding investment debt, done through my offshore company. His entire failing empire now belonged to me. He wouldn't know until it was far too late. Then came the courtroom. Cold, sterile, the stage for their final act. Evan, Claire, Martin, Dr. Wells, all seated, polished and somber. Grandfather rigid, silent. I sat beside Isabel, draped in soft grays. Pale, small, weak, perfect illusion. Dr. Wells took the stand. She's paranoid, delusional, a risk to herself. She was gaining momentum. Then the doors opened. Judge Alistair Finch entered. "I'd like to be entered as a character witness," he said. The room froze. Evan's face blanched. Claire's mouth fell open. Martin's fingers twitched. Before Wells could recover, a court officer approached. "Dr. Veronica Wells, you are hereby served. State Board investigation. Immediate suspension. Ethics violations." Her testimony? Worthless. Isabel stood next. "We wish to submit evidence regarding Mr. Martin Reynolds. Photos, bank records, gambling slips, offshore transfers. Hours old." Martin rose, sputtering objections. But it was over. During a recess, I approached Claire. Silent. I showed her my phone. Screenshots. Bank transfers. Her own money. Wired directly into Evan's accounts. She paled. She hadn't just watched. She funded it. And now I had proof. They thought the guardianship hearing would be the end. But it was only the middle. Because what came next would be the fall of everything they built. The guardianship hearing had been a disaster for them. But they didn't stop. They couldn't. Their desperation made them reckless. Sloppy. They pivoted fast. If the court wouldn't hand me over to them officially, they'd make it happen unofficially. I heard the whispers through the gallery vents. Their voices floated upward into the dark like smoke. A wellness retreat. Remote. Isolated. High-end on the surface. But at its core, a gilded cage. A place to tuck me away until the paperwork could be sorted. Martin believed he could bypass standard procedure. That he could use Wells' compromised evaluation as leverage. He was drafting the commitment order that very night. A kidnapping, disguised with medical jargon and signed affidavits. They were going to lock me away. Permanently. While they plotted, I watched from the shadows. And waited. Claire entered my room late that evening. I lay in bed, feigning exhaustion, wrapped in layers of plush blankets. She crept to my vanity, her movements confident. She didn't rifle through the journal this time. She pocketed jewelry, a sapphire necklace, pearl earrings, my grandmother's brooch, each piece worth a small fortune. Later, she'd weep to grandfather. Era must have given them away, or hidden them. She's so confused lately. Lies planted like seeds, ready to bloom into doubt. She took the heirlooms without hesitation. She was already spending a legacy that was never hers. The next morning, Evan filed an emergency petition with the court. Claire supported it with a fresh affidavit. Era made threats of self-harm. Complete fabrication. Martin, now frantic, worked through the night to draft an amendment to the Sterling Trust, one that removed grandfather as trustee. His plan: install Evan and Claire as temporary successors. Cite my instability. Grandfather's age. It was a power grab so naked it dripped with arrogance. Then the transport team arrived. 2 men. Burly. Calm. Polite. Dressed like upscale wellness staff. They told me I was being taken for rest, recovery, healing. Evan stood behind them, his eyes dark with relief. Claire hovered near the door, smiling faintly. Satisfied. I didn't resist. I let them lead me out like a sedated doll. I slurred my words, kept my eyes glassy. I mumbled, "Just need rest." They believed it. They believed everything. The facility was luxurious. High stone walls, expansive gardens, warm lighting, soft music, private rooms. Could have been a spa or a prison. But what they didn't know, it was mine. Technically, it was owned by Amelia, my fiercely loyal college roommate. Officially purchased years ago under a blind trust, funded with sterling shell accounts. She had built it with one purpose in mind: sanctuary for women navigating high-stakes legal entrapment. To outsiders, it was a rehab center. To me, it was a fortress. The staff weren't guards. They were sentinels. My sedation? Water capsules. My confinement? A luxury suite with encrypted communications and satellite uplink. The moment I arrived, I activated the next phase. A letter was sent to grandfather. The handwriting was shaky. The thoughts scattered. Dear grandfather, they say I need quiet. I don't remember everything. I'm sorry for worrying everyone. Love, Era. To any outsider, it read like the ramblings of a broken woman. But embedded within the lines were codes. Phrases we'd agreed upon long ago. Should I ever be compromised, grandfather would know what to do. Meanwhile, Evan visited, a bouquet in hand, a gentle smile on his face, fake concern dripping from every word. He brought divorce papers. Just a formality, Era, he said, to protect your assets while you recover. He watched me closely, waiting for me to snap, to resist, to betray the act. Instead, I let my hand tremble. I let tears well in my eyes. I signed. He kissed my forehead, triumphant. The fool didn't realize that the paper, standard on the surface, had been altered. The paper was special, treated. The ink? Invisible until triggered by UV light. Inside those pages were booby traps. Evan's own confession to fraud, coercion, and infidelity. Prepared by Isabel. Activated by his signature. He just handed me a legal sword with his own hand. To the head nurse, a smart, quietly observant woman, I made an offhand comment. My earrings. I think Claire borrowed them. Or maybe I lost them. I forget things lately. Another seed. She made a note. Checked the logs. Only one visitor. Claire. At the same time, Julian Vance, grandfather's rival turned ally, was gathering. He'd received my letter. Decoded it. Grandfather gave him full authority. Access to deeper sterling vaults. Forgotten trust formations. Buried records. Julian had waited years to dismantle Martin Reynolds. Now the knife was in his hand. He reviewed the divorce papers Evan had smugly delivered. Activated the UV ink. Saw everything. Then requested an emergency Sterling family meeting. The trap was ready. Evan, Claire, Martin, all arrived, expecting grandfather to surrender, to announce retirement, fragility, a final passing of the torch. Instead, grandfather sat silent. And Julian Vance stood. He held up my letter. Read it aloud. Then decoded it line by line. Explained its meaning. Proved my lucidity. Then he played the security footage. Claire pocketing jewelry. Martin whispering about clause amendments. Wells coaching Evan on faking concern. Evan admitting the affair. It played out on the massive screen, each clip timed perfectly one after the next. Gasps. Silence. Shock. Then Vance brought out the divorce papers. Used a UV light. The clauses flared up. Evan's digital signature over damning confessions. Martin tried to interrupt. Tried to threaten. Bargain. But Vance wasn't done. He revealed the amendment Martin had tried to push through. And announced the result. A comprehensive forensic audit of every legal document Martin had ever touched for the Sterlings. 20 years of secrets about to be dragged into the sun. Martin slumped. Defeated. But it wasn't over. Vance reached for an ancient ledger. Thick. Dusty. Real. He placed it on the table. Everything you were fighting for, he said, was a decoy. He opened the book. The Sterling Trust Fund? A diversion. A designated disbursement vehicle. He paused. The real Sterling wealth, the controlling shares, the true legacy, is held under the Sterling Heritage Corporation. He turned the page. And the majority shareholder. He looked up. Is Miss Alara Sterling? Evan looked like he'd swallowed poison. Claire's mouth opened. No words came. Martin closed his eyes. They had spent years fighting over scraps, while I held the whole empire. Then Vance added, almost casually, Sterling Heritage recently acquired the mortgage deed for the downtown building housing Mr. Davies' investment firm. Evan choked. And per the prenup clauses triggered by infidelity, all jointly held assets have already been transferred to Miss Sterling. Then grandfather spoke. Quiet. Steady. There's something none of you understand about our family, he said. He looked at them, Evan, Claire, Martin. The Sterlings, we have a legacy. He looked at me. A gift. A warning. The ability, under extreme betrayal, to return. To protect what must be protected. He gestured toward an ornate locked cabinet. Era is not the first. And she won't be the last. Vance added one final blow. While you plotted over tea, he said, looking at Claire. She completed degrees in financial engineering and quantum computing under false identities. He tossed a dossier onto the table. Patents. Research. Credentials. Worth billions. He leaned back. The meek Aries you thought you knew was a mask. The woman in front of you is a predator. Financial, legal, strategic. Silence. Then the screen came alive again. A final video compilation. Confessions. Betrayals. Hidden audio. Dr. Wells. Martin. Evan. Claire. All caught. When the lights came back on, Evan collapsed to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. He clutched my hand. Era, please. I was wrong. I was manipulated. But I did love you. I still do. Don't do this. Claire stumbled forward too, grabbing at my sleeve. Sister. I was scared. I was always second. I'm sorry. Martin, cold, strategic, tried a different approach. I have information. I can testify against them. Immunity in exchange for cooperation. Even Wells, in a letter Vance read aloud, begged for leniency. Claimed trauma. Regret. I looked at them, each one, and I felt nothing. No hatred. No triumph. Just release. I pulled my hand from Evan's. No, I said simply. To all of them. No. The word didn't thunder. Didn't need to. It was quiet. Still. Absolute. And in that stillness, the air in the Sterling library fractured. Evan's lips parted as if to argue, to plead again. But I had already stepped away. My voice didn't rise. Didn't quiver. Because this wasn't fury anymore. This was freedom. Evan's hands fell from mine, trembling slightly. Claire remained on her knees, still clutching the hem of my coat like a forgotten child. Martin had slumped into the nearest chair, the legal weight of his ruined legacy sagging across his shoulders. They didn't realize it yet, not fully, but the war was over. And I hadn't just won. I had rewritten every rule. I turned my back to them and walked. Out of the library. through the arched sterling corridor that had once felt like a gilded cage. My heels clicked softly on marble tile, a slow metronome counting down the final seconds of their reign. Behind me, silence stretched. Not a single footstep followed. It wasn't revenge I carried. It wasn't rage. It was release. The feeling of air after suffocation, of clarity after confusion, of light cracking through a long, heavy ceiling. 1 year later, the Mediterranean sun spilled like honey across the horizon. Beneath my feet, warm sand, the grainy weight of earth that hadn't been bought, threatened, or inherited but chosen. Mine. The private beach belonged to me. The sea shimmered quiet and endless. 1,000 miles away from Evan's cologne, from Claire's cloying perfumes, from Martin's hushed manipulation. Here there were no ghosts. No whispers. No traps. Grandfather sat beside me, a worn novel in hand. His sharp eyes softer now. Worry lines faded. The storm had passed. Our reconciliation had taken time. He had doubted, hesitated, but not anymore. He didn't just see me as his granddaughter. He saw me as his successor, his equal, the woman who had stared down betrayal with the calmness of strategy and the ruthlessness of survival. The Sterling Heritage Corporation was mine now, publicly, undeniably. Its reach extended across continents, and under its protection I built something new. The AV Foundation, a merger of names, Era and Vance, legal defense, financial literacy, protection for those betrayed by the people closest to them, a lifeline for those silenced by fear or love or loyalty. But that wasn't all. There were whispers, quiet ones, of a hidden project within the foundation, a backroom with no lights, a series of encoded case files that couldn't be accessed through conventional means. Some claimed it was myth. Others believed the truth, that somewhere, using secrets from an ancient sterling grimoire, I offered second chances. Not to everyone, only to a few, the ones who, like me, had once seen death from the inside, and chosen to come back different. What we called it didn't matter. Redemption, reset, rebirth. It was never confirmed, never spoken aloud, but those who knew knew, and those who received it, they never returned to their old lives. They started new ones. I never told grandfather everything. Some parts belonged only to me. The girl I used to be. The fall. The scream that never came. The moment my spirit hovered between life and oblivion. And the choice to come back, not as the old me but as something forged sharper, smarter. On the surface, my days were peaceful now. Board meetings, legal hearings, estate negotiations. But beneath that, stillness, control. The scent of salt brushed against my cheek. The tide was rising. In the distance, the waves whispered against stone, their rhythm constant, patient, like time itself. I thought once that wealth was protection. Then I thought it was power. Now I understood the truth. Real wealth is peace, the ability to breathe without fear, to stand alone without trembling, to walk away not because you've won but because you're free. That evening, I lit a fire on the beach. A small one. Simple. I took out the last thing I hadn't yet burned. The original prenup. The one Martin had crafted with deceit stitched between clauses. The one Evan had tried to unravel. The one Claire had schemed to invalidate. It was no longer necessary. Not legally. Not strategically. But symbolically. It was the final chain. I held it over the flame. Watched it catch. The paper curled slowly. Turned black. Ash scattered like moths.
No ceremony.
No final words. Just a quiet end. A long overdue burial. A soft voice broke the silence. You never told me what you saw that day. The day of the fall. Grandfather's eyes were still on the fire. His tone casual, but I knew him too well. He wasn't asking what I saw outwardly. He was asking what I saw inwardly. I looked out at the ocean. The horizon blurred in gold and blue. I saw how far they'd go. And how far I was willing to come back. He nodded slowly. The grimoire always said, the price of returning is clarity. And solitude, I added quietly. He didn't deny it. He never had. The next morning a letter arrived. A plain envelope. No return address. Inside. A check for a substantial donation to the AV Foundation. The signature at the bottom? A name I recognized. One of Evan's former business partners. He was facing charges now. Fraud. Embezzlement. But the check? It came with a note. She gave me a second chance. Tell her. I won't waste it. I folded the letter gently, tucked it away in the archive reserved only for quiet victories. The ones that didn't need headlines. Only memory. There are still days when I wake and expect the weight to be there. The pressure in my chest. The tightness behind my eyes. The sense that I am being watched. Judged. Used. But then I breathe. And I remember the steps I took. Each one sharpened by betrayal. Each one deliberate. I am not vengeful. I am not forgiving. I am something else entirely. I am the lesson. The one they never thought I'd live long enough to teach. And now? I am untouchable. There's a particular kind of silence that follows destruction. Not the stunned quiet after a scream, but a deeper hush, like the air itself is holding its breath, afraid of what might come next. That was the silence I walked into when I returned to the city. Not to reclaim, not to revisit, but to observe. Evan's world was collapsing. His firm, once glossy with false prestige, was under federal investigation. The offices, once bustling with junior analysts and bright-eyed interns, now stood half empty. Subpoenas replaced performance reviews. Bank accounts frozen. Board members fleeing like rats from a sinking yacht. They thought Evan had built his empire on brilliance. Now they saw the truth. It had always been built on me. His name no longer opened doors. It opened inquiries. I watched from the cafe across the street, sunglasses hiding my gaze as he exited his building. His suit was wrinkled, hair unkempt, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and tense. He looked smaller, like the scaffolding of arrogance had finally crumbled, revealing the insecure frame beneath. I didn't feel pity, only confirmation. This was how it should be. Claire had disappeared from society pages entirely. No more gallery openings.
No branches.
No carefully curated charity photos. She was living in a modest apartment now, leased under an alias, the name of a long-forgotten aunt. She'd sold the stolen jewelry discreetly, trying to stretch the funds, but it wouldn't last. She was trying to reinvent herself. But reinvention doesn't come from erasure. Comes from reckoning. And Claire had never been willing to face herself. I saw her once. She didn't see me. She was standing at the end of a long grocery store aisle, clutching a bag of flour, staring like she wasn't sure why she was there.
No designer purse. No tailored coat.
Just a woman alone with too many regrets. I didn't speak. I simply left. As for Martin Reynolds, his license was under formal review. The audit Vance initiated had unearthed layers of misconduct. Trust misappropriation, document forgery, insider collusion. Clients lined up to file suits. Some criminal, some civil. The man who once leaned on his family legacy to manipulate others now found himself leaning on overworked public defenders and weak defenses. The fall had been long, and it was far from over. Dr. Wells fared no better. The medical board moved fast. Her credentials were suspended pending full investigation. Her private practice closed. Patients left in chaos. Articles began surfacing. The woman once praised for empathic breakthrough therapy was now revealed as a fraud, a manipulator, a cautionary tale. And me? I wasn't watching for satisfaction. I was watching to witness, to mark the end of a cycle that had started long before my fall. They had tried to strip me of my mind, my freedom, my identity, and in the end, they lost themselves. One evening, I stood in the same museum where Evan first approached me. The gala had returned. New faces, new fundraisers, new illusions. But the lights were the same, twinkling like constellations against marble and glass. I didn't attend as Era Sterling, or as the shell they once manipulated. I attended as Alara Vance, head of the Sterling Heritage Corporation, co-founder of the AV Foundation, and majority shareholder in 6 private international banks. A name that meant nothing to some and everything to others. A name that no longer carried fear, only precision. I wore a black silk gown. Simple, understated, powerful in its restraint. No jewelry except one item. A single sapphire ring. The same one Claire had tried to pawn. Restored. Reset. A reminder that some legacies cannot be stolen. Halfway through the event, a journalist approached. "You're Alara Vance, aren't you? The trust architect? Would you be willing to speak about financial abuse recovery models for our segment?" I offered a small smile. "No comment," I said gently. "But thank you." Then I turned and disappeared into the crowd. Let the myth whisper in my wake. Not long after, a letter arrived in my inbox. From Evan. No subject line.
No greeting.
Just this: "I lost everything. You were the only real thing I ever had. I hope you find peace." I never will. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. He wanted closure. But closure is something you earn. Not something you beg for after destruction. He hadn't wanted me, he wanted access. He didn't love me, he loved the door I unlocked. And once that door closed, he was left staring at the ruins of his own ambition. I received a message from Vance shortly after. Encrypted. Precise. Final audit complete. Legacy preserved. All quiet. Just like that, the war was officially over. I walked to the edge of the Sterling estate that night. The garden lanterns flickered in soft circles around the stone paths. In the greenhouse, orchids bloomed in silence. Some nights the ghosts still came, but not as tormentors, as witnesses of who I had become. I stood beneath the iron archway and whispered, "You tried to erase me." Then I smiled. But I rewrote everything. And the stars above blinked in quiet agreement. The ocean no longer reminded me of the fall. For a long time it had. That moment, staircase marble against skin, air rushing past, the helplessness of weightlessness, the shock of betrayal landing hard in my bones. But not now. Now the ocean reminded me of rebirth. Waves that erased old footprints. Tides that returned the shore to silence. I stood ankle-deep in the Mediterranean, the water cool and honest around my legs. Distant gulls cut the sky like punctuation marks, and the breeze carried no perfume, no lies, just the salt of something real. Behind me the villa waited, designed not for grandeur but peace. No security detail at the gate. No advisors murmuring about fund restructuring. Only stillness. Inside I passed through wide, open halls, walls lined with soft linen and clean oak. There were no portraits.
No reminders.
Just one shelf, low, unlit, holding a single object. The grimoire. Passed down, hidden, protected. Its pages no longer terrified me. No longer whispered threats of destiny or burden. They guided. There were rules to rebirth. Not mystical. Not magic. But psychological, emotional, ancestral. A family legacy kept off the books. Passed not through lectures but moments of fracture. Moments so sharp they tore a person open and asked, "Do you want to go back?" And more importantly, if you do, who will you be? I had chosen, and my rebirth had been not a gift, but a test. Survive the first betrayal. Or don't. But if you do, remember everything. Most didn't. Many who returned did so by accident, with fogged minds and broken hearts. But me? I'd returned with purpose. Not just to expose them. Not just to reclaim my name. But to remember who I had never been allowed to be. Alara. The name felt different on my tongue. Like it had always been mine, hiding in the wings until the old version of me had the grace to die. Aries had been soft, curious, warm. Alara, she was steel inside velvet. Not bitter, not hard, just clear. Sometimes I missed her Aries, the girl who believed love could change a man, who thought marriage was a shield, who signed legal papers with shaking hands and a trusting heart. But then I remembered that girl had died at the bottom of a staircase. And the woman who stood now, she did not flinch. She did not beg. My phone buzzed on the terrace table. A single notification. Transfer confirmed. Assets secured. All divisions aligned. It was Isabel's way of saying, "Your empire is protected. Your legacy is locked." I smiled. Not for the wealth, but for the finality.
No loopholes. No unfinished threads.
Across the bay, the sun was beginning to dip. I closed my eyes, and for a moment let the memories return briefly, carefully. The way Claire looked at me in court, when she realized I had seen everything. The way Evan begged, not from remorse, but from the realization that I had stopped loving him years ago. The way Martin's shoulders sagged when the audits began reading like a confession. The way Wells' voice cracked during her final hearing. Stripped of calm, her title, her career. They were no longer monsters to me. They were less. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing against the encroaching dusk. Another case file. A young woman from Sao Paulo, 29, inheritor of a tech conglomerate, engaged to a man her father trusted. But something didn't add up. Late-night calls. Invasive concern. A therapist referred by the fiancé's family. Too familiar. Too dangerous. I clicked the encrypted tab and opened the second ledger. The one that didn't exist on paper. This wasn't just financial aid. It was prevention, pattern mapping, legal interception, evidence safeguarding. Tools I had never been given. Now delivered quietly to others, women like I had once been. The hidden branch of the AV Foundation. Some said it was too much. That I was playing God. But they didn't know what it meant to be erased before anyone knew they needed to remember you. There was a knock on the glass. I turned. Amelia. Still tall. Still wild-eyed. Still brilliant. She stepped onto the terrace with a small box in her hands. "What's that?" I asked, sipping my tea. "A gift," she said. "From Vance." I raised an eyebrow. She set it down and opened it. Inside, a single silver key. Ornate. Ancient. And a note. "For the next door when you're ready."
No explanación.
No context. Just trust. I smiled. Julian Vance never said more than he needed to, but he always gave exactly what was required. That night, I stood at the back of the garden, beneath the olive tree I had planted after my return. Its roots had taken quickly. Deep. Thirsty. I rested my hand on its trunk, closed my eyes, and whispered, "I'm still here." Not in spite of what they did, but because of it. They forged me, not with love or kindness, but pressure, fire, treachery, and I had emerged unbreakable. Later, as the stars stretched open like a silk ribbon, I wrote in my own journal, not for therapy, not for evidence, just for me. They tried to write the ending. I rewrote the author. Now I write every page, and the ink dried slowly in the soft sea breeze. There's a sound the world makes when no one is lying. It isn't silence. It's something softer, something deeper. The absence of performance. The absence of masks. I first heard it the morning I let go of fear. The villa had no locks inside. No secret compartments. No passwords on the bedroom door. Because no one here was trying to take anything from me. That alone was a kind of wealth I hadn't known how to measure before. I spent mornings barefoot in the citrus garden, pruning branches by hand. The lemon trees bloomed late this year. Their flowers were small but bright, defiant in the mild winter sun. Some days I trimmed them too short. But that's the thing about life when it isn't under siege. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to learn gently. Inside, I received a message from Isabel. Another success story. A client had escaped her situation. Safely. Quietly. The man in question, a tech advisor for her family, had discovered the hidden camera she planted in their wine cellar, where he met his real partner to discuss discrediting her through fabricated medical reports. She'd documented everything. And because of the systems I had created, she'd had somewhere to send it. Somewhere safe. I didn't feel pride. Not exactly. It was something quieter. Stronger. Like stone forming in the belly of the earth. I took the call from Isabel by the balcony. "Her parents are cooperating now," she said. "They're ashamed, but apologetic. Her younger sister has already moved in with her." "And the man?" I asked. "Fired. Blacklisted. He's trying to pivot to freelance consulting." "He won't get far." "Good. Thank you," she said softly, and for once it wasn't about logistics. "You saved her, Ilara." "No," I replied, watching the ocean pulse against the rocks below. "She saved herself. I just handed her a better weapon." There were days I still saw their faces. Evan, Claire, Martin, Wells, but not in dreams. I didn't relive the trauma. I revisited the pattern, like an architect inspecting a collapsed house, not to mourn it, but to understand the flaw in the blueprint. Because that's what they were, flaws. Each of them operated with the same arrogance, that the world would bend to them because they were clever, because they smiled the right way. They underestimated the one thing their egos couldn't measure: endurance. I outlasted them, not by fighting harder, by seeing clearer. A courier arrived later that afternoon, dressed plainly, no insignia. He handed me a single envelope and left without a word. Inside, another letter. From Claire. It wasn't long. Alara, I know I have no right to reach out. I wouldn't ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't even ask to be acknowledged. I just wanted to say I watched the video, the one from the gala. I saw your face when I adjusted your pillows. You were awake, weren't you? You knew. You always knew. I don't expect redemption, but I see now who you are. And I hope somewhere you find something close to peace. Not for me, just for you. I sat with it for a long time, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. I thought for a fleeting second of the girl Claire used to be, the little sister who used to cry when I beat her at chess, the one who used to braid my hair too tight on purpose, the one who just once had whispered, "Be careful with him, Alara." That girl had been real, before fear and envy drowned her. I didn't reply, but I didn't tear the letter up either. I folded it, placed it inside the grimoire, between two pages that spoke of mirrors and mercy, not as forgiveness, but as closure. Later that week, a visitor arrived at the villa. Tyson, grandfather's old friend's grandson, a young attorney who had shadowed Julian Vance during my court case. He stood tall on the threshold, holding a briefcase and wearing a polite, cautious smile. "I'm not here for business," he said. "I came to say thank you." "For what?" I asked, gesturing him toward the terrace. "For surviving. For letting us witness it." I tilted my head. "You sound like someone who's seen the fire from close." He laughed quietly. "My mother was almost institutionalized by her second husband. He told everyone she had postpartum psychosis. Said she was unstable." My hands gripped the teacup a little tighter. "She wasn't." I asked. "She was tired, isolated, betrayed, but not unstable." "And what happened?" "She didn't have anyone like you." Silence stretched between us. Then I said, "She does now." He left hours later. We didn't discuss law, or assets, or leverage, just resilience, pattern recognition, the architecture of betrayal. When he walked away, I realized something. Not every survivor needed saving. Some needed language, words to name what had happened, what had been done to them. And that was power too. That night I walked down to the cove. The tide was low. Small shells glittered in moonlight like secrets exposed. I sat on the stone ledge and let the waves soak my ankles. Above me, stars shimmered through a cloudless sky. And I thought, this, not vengeance, not even justice, but existence. Unshaken, unbothered, undisturbed. The final phase of any story isn't about punishment. It's about absence. The absence of fear, of grief, of the constant ache of needing to be believed. I no longer needed anyone to believe me. I had made the truth undeniable. I dried my feet on the hem of my dress and walked back up the hill barefoot without flinching. The stones no longer cut me. The path no longer scared me. It was mine now. It started with a whisper, an encrypted message through a secure line. No signature, no identifiers. Only this. I think they're doing it to her too. Attached, a single photo, blurry, taken from a distance. A woman, early 30s, slumped on the edge of a clinic bed, pale, eyes unfocused. A man, too sharply dressed for the space, standing over her with a clipboard. Her name was Mira, and her story was becoming too familiar. The clinic was real, licensed, clean, located in a quiet neighborhood in Madrid. But beneath its whitewashed walls, the same script: gaslight, isolate, medicate, institutionalize. Mira had inherited a share in a family-owned biotech company after her father's sudden death. Weeks later, her fiancé, Eric, claimed she was forgetting things, then hallucinating, then paranoid. He introduced her to a psychiatrist, Dr. Selman. They began therapy, joint sessions, medication. Soon she was missing board meetings, misplacing documents, acting erratic, or so the reports said. But one cousin, Rafi, refused to sign the petition for guardianship. He reached out to us. To me. I booked a flight that same night. Not as a Lara Sterling. Not even as a Lara Vance. Just a quiet investor with an interest in neurological research facilities. The kind of woman no one remembered unless she asked to be remembered. Myra's clinic sat in a renovated townhouse. Too charming. Too perfect. The receptionist's smile never reached her eyes. When I requested a consultation with Dr. Selman, they asked for a referral. I handed them one meticulously forged, complete with falsified credentials and a ghost medical ID, linked to a defunct insurance provider in Zurich. They barely glanced at it. Within 20 minutes, I was seated in the consultation room. Dr. Selman arrived, calm and clinical. He asked about stress, about sleep. He offered supplements, then hinted gently at longer-term monitoring. I asked him about Mira. He froze, just for a second, then recovered. Confidential, he said. I smiled faintly. Of course, I replied. But he knew. I had said her name with too much purpose. Back at the hotel, I opened the secure drive Rafi had provided. Videos, emails, bank statements, and the last text Mira had sent before her phone was wiped. They say I'm sick, but I know I'm not. I'm scared. I think Eric wants my shares. She'd sent it 3 hours before she was sedated. I met Rafi in person the next day. He was nervous, young, too emotional to play this game the way it needed to be played. But his instincts were sharp. He had already planted one recording device inside Eric's car. I gave him 3 more. You're going to help us break this wide open, I said. He blinked. Why me? Because she trusts you. And because I know exactly how this feels. 3 weeks. That's how long it took. By the end of it, we had audio of Eric instructing Selman to increase Myra's dosage before the next shareholder vote. Video of Mira slurring during a meeting, while Eric reassured board members she was under close medical supervision. A paper trail of asset transfers, shares Mira didn't remember signing over, and a hidden clause in her medical directive, naming Eric as the default executor in the event of psychological incapacitation. The signature on that clause? Digitally forged. Sloppy. Greedy. When I showed the findings to Julian Vance, he shook his head slowly. Textbook, he muttered. It's becoming a trend, I said. He looked up sharply. It's becoming a business model. We acted fast. Mira was moved quietly, with legal clearance and medical backup, to one of Amelia's hidden care houses in northern Portugal. She was sedated, yes, but not drugged. She was safe. She woke up 48 hours later in a sunlit room. Clean. Alone. She wept for a full day. Then asked for a pen. She's writing her account now. We'll redact the names. Change the dates. But the pattern will be unmistakable. She wants people to know. Not her story. The blueprint. Back at the villa, I updated the internal system. Myra's case was added to a growing library. Each one stored in encrypted layers. Tagged by region, manipulation type, psychological tactic. We were mapping something bigger than fraud. We were mapping predation. And exposing its soft underbelly. That night, I lit a candle in the study. Not for Mira. Not for me. But for the girl who still existed in too many bedrooms, on too many therapy couches, whispering, I think something's wrong. But no one believes me. She's who I do this for. Always. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come back. If I had stayed silent. Let them declare me unfit. Let them steal everything. Would they have grown bored once I was tucked away? Or would they have moved on to someone else? Claire, maybe you would have found a new target. Martin, a new dynasty to bleed. Evan, a new fortune to leech off. Dr. Wells, another patient. The machine would have kept grinding. But instead, I broke the machine. Not in anger. Not with violence. But with proof. With documents. With records. With code. With audio. With truth so loud it couldn't be denied. I received a letter from Mira yesterday. Real paper. Ink. She wrote, You don't even know me. And you believed me before I believed myself. That's what they steal first. Belief. Thank you for giving it back. Belief. Such a simple word. But it rebuilds everything. As I sat in the library that evening, rain tapping gently against the glass, I realized something. This wasn't just my new life. It was my real one. Everything before had been a rehearsal. This was the stage. No audience. No applause. Just the quiet sound of lives not being ruined. I added Myra's letter to the grimoire, folded between pages that spoke of binding spells and unbinding legacies. Because that's what this was now. Not vengeance. Alchemy. Turning pain into armor. Turning trauma into map lines. Turning betrayal into blueprints. The storm passed by dawn, and the air smelled like citrus and salt. It was late, past midnight, when I received the encrypted ping. One of our offshore monitors had been triggered. An anomaly. Not financial. Legal. A motion filed in a quiet district court in a state I hadn't visited in years. Filed by Martin Reynolds. First I laughed. A soft, disbelieving sound. He was finished. Professionally dismantled. Legally discredited. But there it was. Reynolds versus Sterling Heritage Corporation. Filed pro se. No counsel. No firm. Just a lone man trying to crawl back into relevance by suing a structure far too vast for his reach. His claim? Defamation. Career sabotage. Unlawful surveillance. He cited coordinated attacks and psychological warfare. He referenced footage from the gala, the audits, the UV-ink divorce papers. He framed it all as a conspiracy. I could have ignored it. It was legally doomed from the start. But something in me paused. Curious. Not afraid. Not angry. Just interested. Julian Vance called before I could even forward the file. I saw it. He filed it from a public library, I murmured, still scrolling. He's desperate, Julian said. But he's clever. And he still doesn't understand what I am now. Should I bury it? No, I said. Let him speak. And speak he did. Martin's hearing wasn't televised. But I watched from the secure stream, quietly authorized by contacts we kept in the ethics committee. He wore the same tired suit. The same tie he used to adjust with theatrical flair. But now it hung crooked. His eyes were hollow. His voice, once confident, shook. He called witnesses. None showed. He referenced documents. All inadmissible. He spoke for hours. About betrayal. About inheritance. About the cruelty of being discarded by the very people he served. He painted himself as a loyalist, a victim, a man brought low by the ungrateful elite. And beneath it all? One truth. He missed the power. Not the money. Not even the status. Just the influence. The ability to move pieces on a board where he no longer had a seat. When the judge ruled, the dismissal was swift, brutal, baseless, malicious, vexatious. He was fined, barred from filing any further actions regarding the Sterling estate without direct oversight. Another door closed. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell Isabel or Amelia or even grandfather. Instead, I sat in the library, staring out at the moonlight falling across the olive tree. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No victory. Just quiet. There's a strange kind of peace that follows the final act. Not the finale with fireworks. The one that happens after the curtain falls. When the audience leaves. When the costumes are hung and the stage is dark. The after. I was living in the after now. A week later I received a small package. Unmarked. No note. Inside, a sterling silver watch. It was grandfather's. But not the one he wore daily. This was the old one. The one he kept in the top drawer of his desk, beneath the velvet lining. Engraved with 3 initials, S.H. Era Sterling Hale. My name from before the rebirth. I held it gently. The metal was cool. Not a gift. Not a message. Just a return. A closing of a loop. I wore it to the next foundation gala. Not as a symbol of the past, but of continuity. The present built not despite history, but upon it. The gala was smaller this year. Curated. We no longer invited politicians or legacy press. Just survivors. Advocates. Architects of new systems. Those building shelters, not castles. Mira attended. She wore emerald green. Spoke with precision. Laughed too loudly but beautifully. Her story had become a quiet ripple in the network. The man who tried to silence her had been quietly disbarred. His assets frozen. His name erased from the company registry. She had voted him out herself. We hugged before she left. "Thank you," she whispered. I smiled. "You did that part." "No," she said. "You taught me how." After she left, I found myself alone on the balcony again. The stars were generous that night, spilling across the sky like shattered crystal. I clutched the watch in my palm, and I remembered the moment I signed the prenup, the tremble in my hand, the warmth of Evan's fingers as he smiled at me across the marble table. I remembered the way Claire adjusted my pillows in the hospital, her touch too soft, her smirk too cruel. I remembered Dr. Wells' hand on my wrist, guiding my pen toward consent forms. And I remembered how Martin's voice always dropped half a tone when he lied. They had all crafted a narrative for me. That I was naive, fragile, unstable, weak. But what they never realized was that I was listening, I was learning, and I would come back sharper. They wrote the beginning, but I wrote every ending. There's a file I keep at the very bottom of my encrypted archive, labeled only as remains. Inside, the untouched copies of the original prenup, the hospital report, the affidavit Claire filed, Martin's financial records, Dr. Wells' malpractice settlement. All untouched, unedited, because history must be remembered, not weaponized, but never erased. I opened the file that night, read every line, let it move through me. Then I closed it and locked it away, not out of fear, but to keep it from ever being misused again. We protect not just the future, but the memory of what we endured to get here. The wind shifted, carrying sea salt and citrus through the room, and I whispered into the night. You tried to silence me with signatures. I looked down at the watch. I answered with documents you never imagined existed. And the night whispered back. There's an art to knowing when a story ends. Not when the villains fall or when the court rules in your favor, but when the echoes stop. When you can breathe without waiting for another blow. When silence isn't suspicious. It's earned. A year had passed since I left the courtroom behind. Since I turned my back on Evan's final plea, Claire's trembling apology, Martin's desperate trade offer. Since I said no, and meant it. I was no longer watched, no longer whispered about, no longer doubted, because those who once circled my name like predators had vanished into the wilderness of irrelevance. The world had kept turning, of course. Markets shifted, wars erupted, scandals bloomed like mold on headlines. But through it all I stayed steady, rooted, no longer building defenses, just building. The AV Foundation had expanded, 3 new international branches, a dedicated response team for legal manipulation survivors, a data pipeline to alert institutions when patterns of gaslighting emerged in high-net estate transitions. People called it revolutionary. I called it necessary. One morning I stood on the steps of a converted monastery in Tuscany, our new trauma law training center. The walls, once confessional, now echoed with strategies, statutes, empowerment. We trained not only lawyers but women themselves, so they'd never again need to ask to be heard. They'd already know how to speak. After the lecture, a woman approached me, older, silver-haired, eyes clear. She extended a hand and said, I read your story in the private archive, the full one, not the sanitized one. I looked at her carefully. You have access? I'm on the Vance Circle, she said. Old friends. Quiet money. We believe. In what? I asked. She smiled. In the ones who returned. Later, I received a message from Julian Vance. Just a name. No context. Celeste. I knew what it meant. Another candidate. Another risk. Another life on the verge of being rewritten by someone else. I replied simply, give her the door. The real one. And sent the coordinates. The door wasn't physical. It was a system. A network. A preparation. The rebirths weren't metaphysical, they were engineered. Safeguards. Information. Timing. And belief. Always belief. I flew to Paris the next week. Not for business. For me. The hotel overlooked the Seine, and the suite was filled with lavender and sun. I took no meetings, no calls, just tea, a journal, and the weightless quiet that comes from finally being safe inside your own skin. On the second evening, a letter arrived. Unmarked. But I knew the handwriting. Evan. I almost didn't open it. But closure, I'd learned, is not for the sender. It's for the one who already walked away. Alara. I was in Monaco last month. I saw a woman wearing your perfume. For a moment, I forgot everything that happened. And I missed you. Not what we had. Not what I wanted from you. But the quiet way you made people around you better. Not by speaking louder, but by making the truth impossible to ignore. I live alone now. I work part-time at a startup that doesn't know my name from the headlines. No one bows. No one listens. But sometime, I think I'm finally learning. I won't write again. This isn't an ask. It's just a confession. You changed me, even if it was after I lost the right to know you. Evan. I folded the letter, placed it under the ceramic teapot, and left it behind when I checked out the next day. Let the past stay where it belonged. Present but powerless. Grandfather passed away that fall. Peacefully. In his sleep. I found him in the garden, his book fallen open on his chest, a smile on his lips. He'd lived long enough to see the future he fought for take root. And I'd lived long enough to carry it forward. At the reading of his will, no surprises came. He left the Sterling Heritage Corporation entirely to me. But more importantly, he left something else. A sealed envelope, marked in his own hand. Open only when the night feels too long. I didn't open it right away. I waited. Weeks. Until a night came when the wind howled over the cliffs near the villa. When the sea roared louder than usual. When the past crept at the edges of the mirror. I lit a fire. And opened the envelope. Inside, a single page. Alara. I knew. From the moment you looked at me in the hospital that day. Not with fear. Not with pain. But with strategy. You had returned. And I saw it. Just like my father once saw it in me. We are not blessed, child. We are burdened. But we are chosen to. Your strength is not in what you rebuilt. It's in what you did not become. You never became them. When they remember you, they will call you cold, merciless, strategic. Let them. But the ones who matter, they will call you a map. Because you drew a way out. And that is legacy. With all my pride. Grandfather. I cried for the first time in years. Not from grief. But from understanding. From permission. That spring the olive tree bloomed again. Full. Wild. Unapologetic. It had taken root like it belonged here. Because it did. So had I. Some nights I still walked the halls of the villa barefoot. No ghosts greeted me. Only memory. Only quiet. Only the soft strength of someone who had survived their own erasure. And then rewritten the world. There's an art to knowing when a story ends. And sometimes, it ends like this. Not with a bang. Not with revenge. But with a woman sitting in the sun, sipping tea, smiling softly. Because no one else is writing her name anymore.